Okay. All right. Okay, so I guess we get started. So one of the column we have over here when it comes to Rishon Tes, Legabi Yabasis. So in Sif Dalet, we basically have when you have the Gedarim making Yabasis, the perfect case that the Gemara talks about Kollel, or the Chavis. So in the Alter Rebbe in Sif Dalet, he says Davar also betilta shemunach al davar mutter. This is like the basics of a basis. So you have a davar aser which is on top of davar mutter. Imenichoy alav nevayoy midaitoy aldashi yisham murach gam b'Shabbos harinasis a heter basis leiser. The regular case of a basis, you had kavanah to leave it on for the whole Shabbos. I shouldn't say that the Rebbe's lashon here is just saying gam b'Shabbos. The chloikis, if it has to be for the whole Shabbos or just for the Shabbos, but the lemaisa what comes out, it's neser betiltul kamahu mamish. So it has the din of the gather of tiltul, just like the muksa item itself. So basically, if you didn't have kavanah, you just forgot it there. That's the case. The Gemara says it's shakach. You forgot about it. It doesn't become aser v'chinim nasa basis lis ula heter. And also the same halacha is if you put a davar, put something that's isur ula heter on top of it. If you go sheniach lavim v'yoyim davar muter betiltul shechashav yoser midavar aser commissioners person shin yud. So the klal he has is that it has to be the davar ha'aser muter has to be more chashiv than the davar ha'aser. It's an interesting stam in that the Magen Avram in Reish Ayin Zayin. Hold on a second. The Magen Avram in that Reish Ayin Zayin, he's giving together for that. That's betiltul in there. Reish Ayin Zayin. Sivkot and Ches. The Magen Avram there says. Hold on a second. Something else. Hold on. I'm sorry. I'm just going to find that for a second. But he goes. The Alter Rebbe goes on and says as follows: Kivich that the Kivich shel nas in the bus is isur movad. Harei oimel adayim beteiroi. Ma'alutim metaltalei avshegame isur lov metaltalei imoy me'elof. So basically, what he's saying is that when something becomes a davar aser, the davar basis for davar aser, davar aser. So then the bottom, the thing itself that you're moving is going to be aser to move. That's the whole thing becomes a muksa. It was on there beginning of Shabbos, and it was supposed to be there for the whole Shabbos. So even if the muksa item is falls off afterwards, it's not going to make a difference. It's still going to be aser, obviously. So for sure, it's going to be aser to move it as you have it. But what the Rebbe now is talking about is where the item itself did not become a davar or davar aser. But the still bottom line is that there's still a piece of muksa, there's some muksa on top of it right now as it is. So the Shulchan Aruch, and the Rebbe saying, he says like this: so then we have a klal that you're being metaltalit together, agav, with the heter. So you're carrying two things. You're carrying the thing that's not a basis, and on top of that, you have a davar aser, davar muter. As long as the davar aser davar muter is more chashiv than the davar aser, it's going to be muter. It's muter metal. So the Rebbe adds in eloshim eshel nayer isur mimenu miyad sorach l'nayer mitchila. V'achar kach yataltal heter yovad lamakshim tzarich alav. So he says, he brings in the cloud that we have is that even if it's not a basis, l'davar ha also the item that you're carrying, it does not become a davar of basis. You're still mechuyev to try to be menayer it off, to shake it off. Then if it's impossible to shake it off, so that'll be mutter, which basically says it's impossible. You can't do the near. You can't be menayer it for you can't do the near. So the question is, why can't you do the near? So some of the things he says is that it's not going to help. You shake it off. You need the space. You're not going to be able to. You can't be menayer it because it's just not going to help. The other thing he talks about is a hefsid. So the Rebbe himself adds in the lashon. It's based on the Magen Avram, but his lashon is oishia eza hefsid b'dover hamuter. So he specifically says it's only in a davar hamuter, and now it's only if it's what's gonna the loss you're gonna have if you shake everything off. In other words, you have a tray with the, let's say, the leichter and something else is the classic case that you have to make a davar basis. So you want to pick it up, you want to move it. The halacha is you're only be allowed to move it if you can't shake it off. In other words, you're allowed to move it because it's a basis for both things, for a heter and for a nisser. But the problem is that there's also this idea, this chiyuv, to shake it off, to knock it off, and not be metaltal the yisr and the heter. The emes is the Bach, when the Shiur brings it, that the Bach in the end of Shiur says that the chiyuv of Niyor is just a chumra ba'alma. It's not the ikar adin. It's always the best possible thing, but it's not a real ikar adin. But what the Alter Rebbe here says is that if so we really have a klal in general. If you're even going to move something, you're being metal to something, the heter and the yisr together. So even though we say that you're allowed to move it, right? Again, the bottom piece doesn't become a basis l'davar aser, but the two pieces are heter and mutter on top of it. So you're allowed to be metaltal it, but you're not. It's not stam. You're allowed to be metaltal it. The klal you have to metaltal is only l'tzarich davar hamutter, meaning if you're worried about the leichter being knocked over, so you're not allowed to pick it up and move it away because that's, even though there's no issue of moving the tray because doesn't become a basis, but there's still this stam. You're being as you're doing it, you're moving it, you are being metaltal the issue also. I got something else with the on top of the heter. So the problem, the cloud, the only time we're matter that is if you mitzarech davar hamuter, meaning if you need the place at the table, you need to move it because you need the table. You need the table space. You want to change the table. You need to put things down on the table. So then it's always going to be mutter because that's considered davar tzarech, davar ha'aser, davar mutter. So that's just in the first place being allowed to move it. Once we're allowed to move it, Alter Rebbe is saying that even though you're allowed to move it, we still have this chiyuv of New York. You have a chiyuv to menayer, you have a chiyuv to shake, to knock it off, to try to shake it off, so you won't have to pick it. You won't have to be metal for both. And exceptions are, as the case with the hefsid. What the Rebbe's lashon is that he says if oishia eza hefsid b'dover hamuter, that the only time you're allowed to carry the two things together is if by shaking it off, shaking off the isser, shaking it off, it would be a hefsid for the davar hamuter, the non-mutz item will be lost. Meaning, if you could shake the whole thing off, and let's say the leichter case, and you put with the leichter, you put bread, or you put siddur, or whatever. I don't know, depending on what person you use, a person can put rings, but put a piece of jewelry, whatever you're putting to make it more chashiv. Which, by the way, Alter Rebbe's sheet is that what's the way that we determine what's chashiv or not goes by what's needed at the time, not necessarily value, but what you actually need for the shop, for that need for Shabbos, for that time, what you need at the time. It's not doesn't go by a monetary value. So when it comes out like that, the only time you'll be allowed to move it is because if you, let's say you're officially moving it for the you'd be metaltalit for the non-muksa item, or in this case, it would be for the area that you're holding it in. But if you could be menayer it, you could shake it off, and then you could shake it down, shake it off, and you won't have to carry it. And the only thing that's going to be a break and be a loss is going to be the muksa item. From the Alter Rebbe, it sounds like you're not allowed to be metaltalit. You'd be mechuyev to be menayer it and take a loss for the Isser item, as opposed to having to. I'm sorry. If you're gonna, it's all, as opposed to the only time you're allowed to move them both together is if the loss is going to be for the heter item, not for the muk side. Now the Mishnah Berurah himself.
Is this not an Alter Rebbe? Which sif is that?
Sif Daled, the end of Sif Daled. It's also in Yud Aleph, Shin Yud Aleph. I'm sorry, Shin Yud, Sif Yud Zayin. In Sif Daled here, his lashon is v'im iesh l'nair oshia eza hefsid b'dover hamuter im yinair es. And in Shin Yud, Sif Yud Zayin, says a similar lashon.
Hefsid bin Yoram.
Does it mean Hasib in Yora?
Where? What's that? Hefsid bin im yinair es iser. It's also
The first paragraph of Yud Zayin. It says, you're not going to have to imain Hefsid bin Yora, that the Alter Rebbe only mentions Hefsid by the Davar Mutter.
Where's that? He's mentioning the Hefsid is a Davar Mutter, right?
Yeah.
Now, so there's a shtickle stira because in Reish Ayin Zayin, the Alter Rebbe Seir says, Siv Vav. In Reish Ayin Zayin Siv Vav, so in Siv Vav, it's a page Ayin Reish Ayin Reish. The end, he says, "In circle go for shulchan." In Efshel Naim Mimenu Haner, Kiyosh Oisef Lener Zeh Yinaim Mitchila Aydei Shiyata Shulchan VeYipol Haner Me'alav Achakach Chatan L'Machasher Lim Iyeshel Nair Kigon Shem Tzarech Oy Lener Zeh B'Makam Acher Oy Sheyesh Chashash Hefsid B'Nir Zeh Shelo Yishover Haner. So it's really in Muskar, it's really in parentheses. So the shaila is what really, and in Shin Ches Sif Hey, where he's talking, he also says a lashon. He doesn't say either way. He just says. He's talking there about if you have a knife that's placed in
which Siman and Sif?
So the Reish Ayin Zayin Vav,
Yeah.
and in Shin Ches Hey.
I see in the notes in the New Shulchan Aruch they're aware of this issue.
Yeah,
That
I haven't seen anybody who was really mataritz it.
Yeah.
I didn't see anybody who's mataritz it. So in Reish Ayin, you could say the muskar in the parentheses. I believe that that they said he might have changed his mind. Is anybody familiar with that?
Yeah.
Is that they say what?
I forget.
Yep.
Reb Chaim Noah had a few reasons for parentheses. One of them was maybe he was chayzer. One is mesupik. The parentheses don't always mean the same thing.
Right. So it's a shiloh what the parentheses mean. I was told that I remember hearing the parentheses means that he was mesupik at the time he wrote it. I don't know if anybody has the better Messiah for that or anyway here. But in Shin Ches is not really in parentheses. And then hey, there he doesn't in Reish Ayin Zayin it says mamish mefurish. The lashon is shaber haner, the ner will break. Sounds like you're not mechuyev to menayr it, even if there is a. I'm sorry, you're not mechuyev to menayr it if the hefset is for the mefurish. She says hefset for the davar aser. But in Shin Ches, where it's not in parentheses, so it's a little bit. His lashon, he says mekomak. He's there. He's talking about the sakinim that were muksa. And if they're in the nadon, they're like stuck in the belt in the cover. So he says there, in Israel when he's talking about knives that were muksa and they were stuck together with other knives. So he says you're allowed to be metal to the whole thing. והוא שיש לו נער הסכן זה מהנדל, או שיש חשש הפסד ינערנו. או שצריך למקום. So he doesn't mention what type is, so the Megillah, I see now the person on the bottom, we had a whole discussion about this, who did the newer ones, they're not real, who was the one who wrote this?
This is, I guess, Rabbi Levin.
Right. So here he says, "What's that?"
That's in Nun Gimel. That's a new ha'ara. That's not an old. That's the
right. The bold ones are so he says mashma dabra aser. Anyway, so here he brings the different shitas. I was wondering if anybody else. I don't know if I couldn't find anybody else who was with Daritz the stira. But Al Kapanim is the Mishnah Berurah himself actually brings Mefurish, and he says that if it's he says that basically anytime that he paskins connected, he paskins like more like the Rebbe's in Reish Ayin Zayin and Shin Ches, he holds that he says the Mashmois of the Magen Avraham is actually more like he doesn't bring the Rebbe those, but he says the Mashmois of the Magen Avraham is mashma that if it's the Mishnah Berurah's lashon is that if you pick it up, if you second, of a main with tzarich lehem klal actually chash b'shem say there's a muksa gufalei gvenu filo near us. Now the menayer it even if it's that's a chashash. But in the Shiur Tziyun he says befurish that if it's that when it's when it comes out when the ikar kavana your ikar kavana for moving it has to be tzarich davar hamuter. That's why it has to be your ikar kavana. But once your ikar kavana is to move it, even if the reason, in other words, if your purpose, you can't move something that even if it's a devasis of davar aser and davar muter, you can't move it just because you for the tzarich davar hamuter aser before the tzarich davar aser. You have the leichter that you're worried about it being knocked over, so you're not allowed to pick up both of them, even though it's a devasis or a heter and a muter. If you have no need for the table, you don't need the space in the table, you don't need the piece that you're carrying, or you don't need anything. You just don't want the candles to be knocked over. That's aser. But the Mishnah Berurah says that if your reason why you can't be menayer it is because of the hefsid of the even if it's the hefset of the davar muksa, he also holds his mutter. One other thing he brings is very interesting. The Halacha brings from Rabbi Akiva Eiger that if you again you're having a case, so this could apply Kuliana for all cases. When one of the cases that's clear from the Poskim, the Shulchan Aruch, that you have to knock it over, you mechayev to do niyar, is sorry, in a case you generally have a chiyuv to do niyar, but once thing is clear from the Shulchan Aruch that you don't have to do niyar is if there's gonna be hefsid. Forget machlokes whether it's for the davar asur or davar mutter, but if you need the space, if you knock it over, it's going to block your space there. So then you're not mechuyev to be menayeret. You need the makam, you're not mechuyev to menayeret. Anytime the niyar is there's a reason why you don't have to do niyar. Again, like the Bach Mashmoy says it's only a chumer ba'alma. All the other places are mashma that's a real full-fledged chiyuv to be menayer or something. Even a basis of davar asur, middle davar mutter. But Rabbi Akiva Eiger has a shayla. He deals with the shaylas like this. And once you pick it up and you move it out of your way, so we have a klal when it comes to a kli shemalach d'liser that once you have a heter to pick it up, you can carry it anywhere you want. You don't have to drop it and put it down the first spot you need. You can put it anywhere. That's the shayla over there. But so Rabbi Akiva Eiger over here says the same idea that once you picked it up and you have to move, you're mechuyev to move it. You're not mechuyev to menayir it afterwards. In other words, when you picked it up, you had a place that you weren't able to knock it over because you weren't able to knock it over because you need the place or because of whatever case it would be, because of tzarich davar mutter, tzarich davar iser. But once you picked it up and you started to move it, he says that you can continue just like kli shemalach iser. You're allowed to continue moving it. So you can continue moving it from there also. Okay, so now there's one other interesting point. So there's another interesting point from the Alter Rebbe. Once we're on the inyanim of bosses, so in a second. So the shaila really here is the miniach is the Evan. Second. So the Alter Rebbe in Siman. A second. Reish Nun Tes. And it would be in Sivkat in Beis, I believe. A second. Yeah, so the Shulchan Aruch in the Alter Rebbe in Sif Beis, Reish Nun Tes Beis, it's talking about when you do atmana. When you do atmana on top of the kli, so you want to be able to move that the kli out. So the pod, the kadera out. So the kisa kadera is covered. You put on top of this. It should come with davar also a talploy. You have something that's also to be metalpin. Ubo little mehem kadera b'Shabbos. Kate said who I say makisa kadera megula. Miksasai megula miksasai mehatmana. Oiches miksasa megula u'mesirei. But after atmana amuksa munachas alav. Ein nasis davar basis l'davar aser lefi she'ein hakisoi mishamesh klal hatmana elo lekadera. Because basically you're not the klal we're having basically is that the kisoi is the hatmana itself. The kisoi here you have a cover, you have a pot cover, and on top of this pot cover you're putting dvarim that are muksa, gizei tzemer, things that don't have a shtamshus, that are not a keli, so they're considered basically muksa. The reason why the pot cover doesn't become muksa, the Rebbe says, because it's not the idea of a tiltul. The idea of a basis is that the basis is there to support, to help, to function as to service the muksa item. That's the whole idea. That it's really a shaila. Does it become bottled to it, or is it because it's a smart of a thing become bottled to it? So it's the cheshivus is it's giving a cheshivus. You have to have the cheshivus of a basis, like we had before. The Alter Rebbe brought also that if you have things that are you're putting chafetzim in a drawer or in a teva or something else, and the reason why you're putting it there is just because you're not putting it directly on top of something that's there. You're not putting it specifically because you want it to stay there. You're just putting it because you don't have any room. You want it to be in the box. So you're the teva, the drawer itself or the shelf itself is going to be a basis for the davar muksa. But the particular piece that you put it on, the particular piece that you put it on there, the reason why you put it on was just because you had no space, you had no other empty space on the shelf or on the drawer. So then that's considered, it doesn't have the cheshivus of it being bottled, the bottom piece being bottled to the muksa piece. So when he says, when it comes to this case also, when you have the atmana, you have the, you're doing atmana, you're insulating your pot. So the cover, even though you have these muksa items that are there to hold the heat in, and they're specifically placed with kavanah to be there on top of the pot cover, but the whole idea is those things are there to be mishtamish, are there to be used for the pot cover, not that the pot cover is there to hold them up. That's what Dr. Rebbe Pasuk is here. So the steer to that, it's really a steer in Magen Avraham also, and I found that the Hillel of David asks this as a kasha, but he doesn't give a teretz, is that in Shin Yud that we're learning, Shin test that we're learning right now, the whole idea of a chavis, putting a chavis, if you meniach even al pi chavis shel yayin lekisui, and you're specifically using this basket as this what do you call it? This rock, this stone, as a cover to be mishamish the wine and the whole kedera itself, as whole riches in general. Why do we view the kedera as a basis to the davar ha usher, to the stone, as opposed to all the wine? You have all the wine in there also. It should be the basis of the davar usher, ula davar mutter. But that's a whole different shaila. But the in mitzias pashtus is that it should really be considered it's there to be mishtamish. It's being mishtamish as a cover for the barrel. It's not there you don't want the barrel to hold up the stone. You don't want the barrel to hold it up. You're putting it there for the stone to be a cover for the barrel. Okay, there's a whole shaila in the case before we have by different pratim when it comes to you have with the delas, the shell of the shell of a squash that you use to draw the water. So when you put it there, it should come bottled to it. Matter of fact, when you're going to be sacking it there, you're going to stick it in there. It's going to become a bottle to it. It's going to be part of the kli. So this apparently doesn't make it part of the kli itself, but it's really being used there to be mishtamish, to serve as a cover for the barrel, not necessarily that the barrel should be what's holding it up. Anyway, so that's another steer that they have, and it really brings there's a few different halachim to mitaritz it. Whether it's depending on how much it has, some shittas hold that the Rebbe would hold that only by atmana, where it's actually there giving a bigger use, like actually doing something affecting the pot itself. You have the heat, and you have it's adding to the heat to the pot itself. It's giving the heat over, as opposed to just to covering it. It's placed on top and it's there to block things from pulling in. It's not really adding anything to the kli itself. So they learned that the atmana there is like a different. It was that the ishtamshus, the use that the atmana is for the gizit samer that's being mishtamish the kedera as a much higher level of ishtamshus, that it's really bottled to it. Mashaking by just using something as a barrel cover, even though your real purpose is for the sake of the wine, but being that the kli itself. It's not actually adding anything to the barrel of wine. That's why it's not considered a bottle to it. Okay, I guess
So
over
just,
here.
just
So
explain that to me one more time. Are you saying if the Evan becomes a chelik of the Keli? Is that the
no,
this?
no, either rabbi. If it's a chelik of the keli, it becomes it won't be muksa. If
Right.
anytime you make as part of a keli, the muksa. I'm just saying it's the ikar kasha would be is that in Reish Ayin in Reish Nun Zat in Reish Nun Tes, we say there that when you're using gizei tzemer, you're using muksa items to insulate the atmana for a pot cover. So the pot cover does not become a basis for the muksa gizei tzemer. The fact that we say that it's not holding up it's holding it up, but its purpose, the lashon is Eina nasis bazlavesa lefisha eina kisu mishamesh klal atmona ela lekadera. Right? It's not the mishamish. It's the atmona. It's ela lekadera. The kisi itself is only used as a cover for the kadera. It's not for the. It's only being used as a. It's being used as. It's not being used. In other words, the muksa is on top of it, but because the muksa is not being the kisu is not being mishtamish with that muksa. In other words, if you have a tray and you have put the leichters on there, the tray is being mishtamish for the leichter. The leichter itself, you have the flame for the nair, the flame, the wick, and the shemen and the oil, the shemen, the psila, and the shemen and the psila, the nair shemen and psila are all there mishtamish to hold up the flame, hold up the light. But in this case, the shaila is this new gather there that when something is only being used as a hishtamshus for, it doesn't have a din of a buses. Meaning, if the buses,
so the kisi is not a buses for the heating things, because the heating thing is not for the cover; it's for the food inside. You're saying, right?
No, I think no. Other rabbi, like the kisa is not the mashmois of the other rabbi is that in order for something to be a buses, it has to be that a buses has to be mishtamish the muksa. Has to be some kind of shimush for the muksa. You have a leichter where you put the on top of a tray, so the tray is mishtamish the muksa.
Yeah,
Whereas,
and
over here, the cover of the kedera, the kisa kedera, is not being mishtamish to hold up the gizeh, the muksa insulating material. Either it's there. The insulating material is there to help the kedera, but it's not the kisui is not holding up it's not going to be used. We don't view the kisui as if the kisui is there to support the insulation. I mean, it is there. It is supporting. Is holding it up, but it's ikar shtamshus is it's. In other words, it almost comes out that the idea of a buses is you want to say that the buses is tafel to the muksa. The buses is tafel to the muksa. So if the buses is tafel to the muksa, so in this case, you can't say that the buses is not going to be tafel to the muksa, because the muksa is there to be in order to be mishamesh to mishamish it's the muksa is the bus the theory is not there to hold up the atmana items. We don't want the atmana items. I mean, it's not the ikar is there for the atmana items are there to help the pot. The atmana items are there to help that pot, not that the pot is there to hold up the atmana items.
okay.
So the steer to that so the Kollel Mechanchim discussion is that basically that we find by the chavis in Shin Test that we're saying now, the chavis is the chavis is you're using a stone as a cover for the chavis, and still we're going to say that that's considered muksa. If you were niach, and you have to deal with the kavana. So obviously your kavana is to use it as a cover. That's what we're saying. So that's considered that's considered dabasas of rasa, even though Lagabi Atmana, we say that if the purpose for it is to be function as a service for the non-muksa item, so then it's okay. Then it doesn't become a basis. Mashenkin over here, he seems to say that it does become a basis.
This is in Siftes?
In Shintes, Sif, no, that's.
I'm sorry, that's above.
In Sif, in Sif, yeah, in Sif, the Kisi, the Shakla Simisham. Yeah, the case of the Kisui, that's the case. That's the Shem. And you're using this oven as a Kisui, and we say that the entire chavis becomes a basis for it.
Mm-hmm.
Anyway, the Tilo David asks a kasha with the sleep of that. Okay, so I guess we'll.
Just by the way, I just want to go back to the previous point you made besides this. He's saying the leichter. He's saying it's mashma from the Al Rebbe because of the different Reish Ayin Zay, whatever it is, and so he's saying it's mashma that you would have to be menar the actual muktzah. You would have to menar the usher, right? Right?
Yeah.
And he's saying the shaila is that efshir also, even if it's like a leichter, right?
If it's a situation where it's you don't need this, it's not going to disturb your space that you need. Meaning,
okay. So however, I mean it's masha from Sifches and Shintes, the end that he says the end is Zayin. Komakim b'makim hefsid yesh liz machaspara acharena. Kunim nafal neir al shulchan. Which part of the Siman Reish Ayin Zayin, which is in the same the same thing. So I can't imagine that Al Rebbe is saying that if there's a leichter and there's a apple, you want to move the tray. Ideally, you should try to shake off the leichter. If it's a rock and there's no hefsed, okay, no problem. But I can't imagine the Al Rebbe's svara is that the leichter, if there's a makim hefsed, you would have to shake off the leichter and then carry the tray with the apple away with the siddur.
Yeah, but this case in Sif Zion, he's talking about something else. He's talking about here whether maybe it doesn't become a basis for cloud. In the other Sif Zion, he's talking about whether it doesn't become a basis. If there's a makam hefsed, then it doesn't become a basis. It's not. He's not talking about a case where it became a basis, right? He's a shaila of in Sif Zion. He's saying the Asia
the thing had to be the whole Shabbos. That was a kavana.
Yeah, that's all shad. That's the machlokes. Yeah. He's making on that case, but not that he's making every other case.
I mean, okay, but for Palmamish, I remember back in the day seeing at my great uncle's house. He would put the siddur on the tray, and they would pick it up. Put it on the table. Have to change the tablecloth, pick it up, and move it.
So that emphasis of that you could have. That could be because it could be the makam of the table. There'll be hefset for the table. It's going to spill on the table, or it's going to fall on the table. You need the makam on the table. So that's already considered. That will also be considered tzarech mutter. Only other shadow would be in the cases where you don't need tzarech mutter. Or you could shake it off the table and fall on the floor. It'll fall in a place where I mean, it's not so hard to get out of it. Those cases because you all have to make sure that the makam itself would be considered a shot. The makam needing the makam itself would be considered davar hamutter. It's only a shaila.
If what? If where? In where?
Where you would move it. If you're worried about it, somebody knocking it over. That's the main case. If you don't need that, you have a space in your table, and you have
the only worry is that someone's going to knock it with a leichter. Can you move it? I mean, I guess Mishnah Berurah says that if you're worried that someone's going to knock over the leichter, you're allowed to move the buses. Let's say to save the Isser.
No, he doesn't. No, I'm sorry. It's that what you have to. The reason to move it has to be the tzarech davar hamutter. But
yeah, exactly.
But instead
of the trial is do you have to be menar the Isser or not?
Menar the Isser, right? So if you could easily knock the whole thing over, and your life.
Yell at someone knocking.
You're not, your life will fall in the corner. Nobody won't bother anybody. You'll just break.
Yeah, that's the
That's the case. That's the machlokes. It's going to the Alter Rebbe in this in Shin Tes. It sounds like you have to knock the whole thing over. You have to throw the whole thing over. Hashem came by in Reish Ayin Zayin in the Muslim Reish Ayin Zayin. It's mashma that if the hefsed is going to be because of the if we got any hefsed, even if it's a hefsed for davar ha'aser, it'll also, you're worried about breaking the nair. It'll also be mutter to metaltal this, derech agav, the two things together.
Yeah, okay. Okay, Yeshkeach, thank you very much.
All right, sure. Okay,
Okay.
good. Yes.